Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Fernando Alonso has indicated his intention to become Mercedes' new driver in 2025, replacing Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes themselves are on board with this idea, but only as a Plan B option, according to certain reports today. The Plan A option was not even born when Fernando Alonso won his first world title. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate loads of new subs over the last few days. This is the Aston Martin AMR24. At least these are the renders of the Aston Martin AMR24. Which actually looks somewhat different to the car in real life on the track, as we shall discuss here in just a couple of seconds. But yeah, this one looks like it is green. Congratulations, everyone. We have some paint on the car. I feel like it should be mandatory to paint the nose, because yes, there's quite a lot of carbon here on the floor, on the front wing, on the rear wing, etc, etc. But it still looks pretty decent because it's the same as last year, and it's green on the nose at least. This is the AMR23 from last year. This is the AMR24 from this year. So it basically looks like the same car. And Dan Fallows has said, the technical team over there has said, it's basically, a strong evolution of last year's car, and they will need it to be. There's reports that they've gained several tenths over the winter period, but, Red Bull are probably going to gain several tenths. Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren are going to gain several tenths. So it seems doubtful that Aston Martin will be able to replicate their success they had last season. That was probably an anomaly at the start of last year with the surprising lack of competitiveness of Mercedes and Ferrari, and of course McLaren. Aston Martin picked up the slack, but as other teams progressed, they weren't able to quite replicate that success. And of course, if they can't replicate last year's podium count, shall we say, then Alonso of course will be considering alternatives. This, however, was just a brief clip here of when the AMR24 took to the track today at Silverstone, and actually the pictures of it on the track look somewhat more refined than it did in the renders. But there are a couple of things that people have noted on the renders, especially with regard to the rear suspension design and just the general philosophy at the rear of the car. We know that last year Mercedes went for a certain gearbox design that needed to be accommodated for with the zero pods. That meant that teams that bought the gearbox and the rear suspension from them, Aston Martin, Williams, were also, suffering really from the problems with that Mercedes concept. Mercedes have said that they're going to change that this year. Smaller gearbox, more compact rear structure, more straight line speed as well due to less drag, but also a vast change in the rear suspension design. And we're actually seeing that here on the Aston Martin already. So Aston buy their rear suspension and their gearbox from Mercedes. So whatever we see on the back of the Aston Martin is what we should expect to see on the Mercedes when that's revealed in a couple of days' time. We've inherited new suspension from Mercedes, Dan Fallow says. They give us the gearbox and the structure of the rear suspension. So that has changed slightly from last year as well. So there's a change on the rear, but on the front it's similar because that's what they design themselves. And naturally, as Craig Scarborough says, here you go with a push rod rear suspension design. So this is just worthy of a little bit of analysis. Look, I'm not a technical expert by any means. There's other people that do that far better than I do. But it is no secret that in this set of regulations, the suspension design in terms of maintaining a consistent mechanical platform is massively important to generating consistent aerodynamic performance around a track. The Red Bull preference has been to use a pull rod front suspension and a push rod rear suspension. Mercedes and Ferrari, and therefore their customer teams, Aston Martin and Williams, McLaren designed their own suspensions, I'm pretty sure. So I think they had the same kind of thing that Red Bull did with more of a push rod rear suspension, but those other teams I mentioned used a pull rod. Now it seems that Mercedes have switched to a push rod, and that's why we see this on the Aston Martin. So yeah, very interesting. We'll see what happens on the Mercedes in a couple of days' time. But Dan Fallows actually says, former Red Bull man, of course, went to Aston Martin, and then they had the AMR22B, and then all the Red Bull guys had the Green Bull can that they put on side. That was pretty funny. But yeah, there's a lot of lap time to come. We'll take the approach that Red Bull are absolutely beatable. That's what we're chasing after. We're focusing on them. That's what we're aiming for, he says. And as Alonso says, they've gained a few tenths over the winter, but is that going to be enough? Because, as he says, I don't think we've closed that gap to Red Bull. What we did last year was gaining a second from one car to another was once in a lifetime, he says. So it is certainly unlikely they'll be able to replicate that success. And if Alonso feels that his future chances of getting Grand Prix victories, even fighting for a championship or just straight up getting more podiums, are better served in another team, and there is certainly one team on the radar that he might be looking at, then we know what Fernando Alonso is potentially like. Before we dive into some more details on that, there has been another report on the Christian Horner situation. I just have to give you guys the update because there's too much happening on this every day to gloss over it. So we talked yesterday that Stefano Domenicali and Formula One are not really happy about this development. Any questions around what some were describing as cross-border behaviour between what appears to be like a middle management female employee and Christian Horner. We don't know what went on behind the scenes. We know that there's a severe investigation going on to try and resolve the situation. But Formula One and Liberty Media are concerned about the potential image of this in the Formula One landscape. So apparently, Domenicali has called up Mark Mateschitz, son of Dietrich Mateschitz, who of course passed away before the start of last season at the request of his US bosses. Reported content of the conversation: the US owners of F1 promoter Liberty Media understand no fun on topics related to border crossings in the office. Okay, some translations involved here, but basically, if these accusations are legit, then Horner's got to go, and even Liberty Media are going to put pressure on Red Bull to do that, even though maybe you could argue it should be a Red Bull decision what they decide to do. This, though, was another fascinating piece in the article that said the following, and I don't really know where this has come from, to be honest. Over the past 3 years, he has made himself, this meaning Horner, the enemy of both Red Bull technical genius Adrian Newey, the family of superstar Max Verstappen, and Red Bull chief consultant Helmut Marko. So I don't know how this is even possible that Horner, whatever he's done behind the scenes, because I don't think it's just about this allegation. There's clearly more to it than that. But I don't know where they're getting this idea from that Horner is now the enemy of Newey, the enemy of Verstappen, the enemy of Marko during a 3-year period where they won every single driver's championship. Like, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and I'm sure there is probably some truth to this, but it's somewhat difficult to believe that Newey and Horner, after their great relationship over many years, have now had like a big falling out. The same with Verstappen, Horner, the same with Marko, Horner. We just don't really know. But the article did say that as far as they are concerned, there is basically zero chance that Horner will be at the Red Bull reveal this upcoming week. It's only in a couple of days now, and this situation is unlikely to be resolved before then, as we presently believe. So people seem to think that it's pretty untenable that Horner will actually be attending that reveal, given all the circumstances around it. And that makes a fair bit of sense. But getting back to Fernando Alonso, there's been lots of talk, and for good reason, on Lewis Hamilton's replacement at Mercedes for 2025. And Alonso, knowing what he's like, is definitely at least considering and eyeing up what this could mean for him. So he has a lot of words to say on Hamilton, on Mercedes, on Aston Martin as well, and what the future of this situation may potentially hold. He said the following: Ferrari has had a very fast car, is fighting for big things. Maybe Lewis can bring that extra fight to the championship. The car is there. Even last year, with a very dominant Red Bull car, Ferrari were able to match the lap time and be faster than in most of the qualifyings, so the car should be fast enough. He's saying, look, Hamilton might be the spark that Ferrari need to get back to winning ways in some respects. He also, though, given it is Alonso, had to throw a little bit of spice in there when he says the following, but he questions Hamilton's claim that driving for Ferrari was a childhood dream. It was not his childhood dream 12 months ago, no, or 2 months ago, I guess, because it was a different dream then. So, honestly, Alonso can't help himself, can he? You can just tell that he had a massive grin on his face while he was saying this, because he wants to have a dig at Hamilton when he gets the opportunity. That's the type of relationship those two guys have, and look, I would love to see another title fight between the two of them before their careers ends, and it's not implausible if what we're about to discuss actually comes through. So I thought this was interesting because people took this as, well, like Alonso's roasting Hamilton or whatever, but actually I think it's arguably the other way around, because Alonso's saying, look, Hamilton isn't just joining Ferrari because it's this childhood dream, and maybe you buy that, maybe you don't. Hamilton has said over the last few years, there was kind of leaked discussions that Hamilton had with the team back in 2015, where apparently he told some of his engineers that winning a world championship for Ferrari was one of his dreams to accomplish. But of course, 12 months ago, even 2 months ago, he was saying, no, Mercedes is my future, this is the plan, and he's obviously changed his mind to some degree. But Alonso seems to be saying, as far as I'm concerned, Hamilton's not just joins because it's a dream and it's like all heart, no head, shall we say, but he seems to be implying that he's joining because there's other reasons that Hamilton thinks that Ferrari is the place to be: car development, trajectory, Fred Vasseur's cooking, whatever you want to say. And while he does say that he's had no contact with Mercedes so far, although that actually might have changed as of this morning, we'll discuss in a second, Alonso did say this: I am aware of my situation, which is unique. There are only 3 world champions on the grid and fast world champions, because in the past maybe there were some champions who were maybe not so committed to be fast, which is kind of interesting. I guess we should analyze that real quick. Probably many drivers he could be talking about. I guess in the recent past, you're probably looking at Raikkonen maybe, or Vettel, a couple of drivers that definitely didn't outstay their welcome, but, as world champions, you're always welcome in the sport, but, weren't as committed maybe to be fast in their latter years, maybe lacked some motivation. I think that's certainly true for Kimi, as we full well know. Of course, he was the 2007 world champion with Ferrari, let's not forget. So Alonso says, look, we've got Verstappen, we've got Hamilton, we've got myself, 3 world champions, 3 very fast world champions, and I am probably the only one available for 2025, so I'm in a good position. Now, he then goes on to say, no, we're working with Aston Martin, I've got confidence in Aston Martin, but I'm sure that he feels like last year was more of an anomaly than the rule, and maybe in the future, with their new facility and everything, they can take some steps. But we've discussed it earlier in the video, Aston still buy the gearbox, the rear suspension from Mercedes. They're still saddled with all the implications of that, whereas Mercedes can happily design everything they want from the ground up. So it's always a bit of a disadvantage when you're a customer team, especially to that extent. And sure, Aston had the leg up on Mercedes for some swathes of last season, but you're never really going to expect that to continue. And if you're Alonso and you get the chance to go and join, the actual Mercedes team rather than their customer team, especially over the next couple of years, you will definitely jump at the opportunity. So Alonso says, racing for Aston Martin is my only priority, but this is, what Alonso quite often arguably says before he jumps ship and goes somewhere else. And he goes on to say, I'm in a privileged position, I'm probably attractive to other teams, the performance they saw last year, the commitment. So, I think Alonso's making it very clear. He is available, he is willing to have discussions, and he is potentially willing to go and join a team like Mercedes. And this is when I opened the Instagram today and we saw the following, which really kicked off some of the rumours about this into overdrive this morning, with Flavio Briatore, as you can see here, controversial character in Formula 1 and elsewhere for a very long period of time, of course, manager at the moment for Fernando Alonso, and long-time friend, and, well, you say what you want about Briatore, but this is a picture of him today in a Monte Carlo cafe with none other than Toto Wolff on the right-hand side, who looks somewhat, I don't know what you want to describe him as here, but anyway, they're meeting up for a coffee. When I'm balling and I've got enough money, I'll be moving out to Monaco, I'll be living there, and I'll be just, hanging out in Toto Wolff's favourite cafes and just kind of seeing what's going on. What was that you said, Briatore? Yeah, let me just have a quick note about that on the napkin. So, yeah, fascinating stuff, really, that these two happen to be meeting up for coffee or lunch or whatever today, given all the rumours around Fernando Alonso currently going around, and I find it rather difficult to believe that Briatore would have managed to avoid discussing the Alonso question with Toto Wolff in this analysis. So I well imagine that some sort of contact between Alonso and Mercedes has now been made, and knowing Alonso, he would absolutely relish the opportunity, right? It makes so much sense for Alonso to try and get this move done. Hamilton going to Ferrari. Alonso would get the chance, given the relationship and, the rivalry that these guys have had since way back in 2007. Alonso would have the chance to replace Hamilton at Mercedes in what would be a very similar car. We believe the 2024, the 2025 cars will be very similar because every team is going to be working on 2026. So Alonso will have the chance to go into a very similar car to whatever Hamilton achieves in 2024 and try and outdo him in similar machinery in 2025, which would of course be fascinating. But also for Hamilton, right, he gets to go to Ferrari and try and do what Alonso couldn't. Alonso was at McLaren a couple of years later, goes to join Ferrari in 2010, spends a few years there, nearly wins the championship in 2012, but doesn't quite. And Hamilton's intention is to go to Ferrari and show Alonso, show Vettel and others, this is how it's done. This is how you bring Ferrari back to the top. This is how you win a championship for them. And of course, Alonso would not be a happy man deep down if Hamilton was to achieve that. So from Alonso's point of view, it's like, well, maybe if I go and take Hamilton's seat, then I could get one back on him in some respect, right? So I think that it makes a lot of sense from Alonso's point of view. And I think if you read between the lines of what he said today, it's definitely on the radar of being a consideration. The question is, does it make the most sense for Mercedes? Because there have been questions on the matter on that one, especially coming out of Mark Hughes at the race. And this was a very interesting piece, actually, that came out here discussing who the likely possibilities for Mercedes are. Now, Toto Wolff said, we discussed the comments probably a week or so ago now, where he said that this is an opportunity, Hamilton leaving, to do something bold. And when he said do something bold, we narrowed that down on the channel to basically 2 options, either Fernando Alonso or Andrea Kimi Antonelli, and we'll discuss him more in a second. Here he is on the screen right about now. So Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz, Esteban Ocon, some other options are still options, but they're not bold options. They're not arguably what you want to do. And let's not forget, Max Verstappen was a potential candidate for a Mercedes seat for a few years. He was speaking to Toto Wolff, but Red Bull, given they had Toro Rosso, had the opportunity, and Helmut Marko had the opportunity to offer Max a seat to come straight into Formula Formula One, and arguably some of the teams are too hesitant to give young drivers a great opportunity in the sport. And sure, Max, however talented he is, and we know that full well to be true now, his first couple of years, lots of crashes, lots of mistakes, lots of issues, but by coming into the sport so early in his life, by the time he was early 20s, has been able to be a frankly dominant force over the last few years of the sport. So I'm sure that Toto Wolff doesn't want to miss the boat on the next Verstappen, and whether Antonelli is that guy or not, that remains a question, but I don't think Mercedes want to miss out on the opportunity. I would say, however, that arguably Antonelli, this guy's only 17, for next year he would be able to drive, we'll see in a second, but there is a good argument to say that maybe Alonso as a 1 year or 2 year stopgap before Antonelli was to come in actually makes a lot of sense as well. But this is what Mark Hughes says, discussing the whole Alonso to Mercedes thing. Absolutely, Alonso does have a realistic chance at Mercedes. From what we understand, though, he is not Mercedes' plan A, but is currently the absolute favourite for plan B. Mercedes' plan A, the race firmly believes, is Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the 17-year-old who is about to embark on his first season in F2 with 5 years on the Mercedes books. The feeling from inside the team is that this is the new Verstappen, and having missed out on Max, Toto is keen not to repeat the mistake. If he has a strong season, there is a strong possibility he will directly replace Hamilton. So this would be quite remarkable in many ways. And of course, this is putting a lot of pressure on Antonelli. The guy's only 17. I mean, look, he's literally a child, right? Literally a kid. And as I say, he was born in 2006, which was a year after Alonso won his first world championship. So it's kind of hilarious in a way how Fernando Alonso's prime competition for the Mercedes seat is literally a child. But look, that's how high they rate this guy. And sure, there's massive pressure on him, but the way that I see it, if you're really cut out for Formula One and to be, a driver of that level, you've got to be able to deal with this type of pressure. So the media are hyping him up for sure. The media probably wants their next Verstappen, as it were, and we'll see if we get that, and Antonelli will have to deal with some of the pressure that is associated with that. If he doesn't deliver quite in Formula 2, there'll be questions, but also, how quickly are they going to be able to make this decision? Because the Formula 2 championship doesn't end until Abu Dhabi. So you wouldn't imagine they're going to keep everything waiting until then, especially because Alonso will need to get a drive sorted out. So Mercedes will probably bide their time. They'll see how Antonelli does at the start of the Formula 2 season, and then they'll make their call probably a few races in to decide, all right, are we going to commit to Antonelli, believe he's the man for the job, which would be remarkable if they do, or do they say, you know what, it might be the safer option, although still rather bold, to get Alonso in for a year or 2 years, and then Antonelli can come in when he's, 19, 20 possibly, as that next generation of drivers. So fascinating future here for Mercedes and for the entire grid as a whole. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.